Hey everybody, Simone here with Bulletproof Business Growth, as always with ideas and insights, what to pay attention to when you are in the process of growing and scaling your business. Now, a lot of times I hear people refer to themselves as the boss. And I always cringe a little when I hear that because to me, that's a really old school way of thinking. Because kind of what that means is the top-down, micromanagey, rigid directions sort of culture that, to be honest, it may have worked a number of years ago, but it certainly isn't working now. Nobody wants to work in that kind of environment anymore. And a lot of people who are still working that way, they're having kind of a rude awakening because they're having a really tough time hiring. Even if they manage to hire, they have a tough time getting performance out of people, or especially later on retaining, right? So very important to kind of get with the times, or the times leave you behind with this. So I love to quote Steve Jobs here, because one of my favorite sayings of his was, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. And that's really how we want to lead expansion, because that's really the only way you can lead expansion. Because otherwise it's just not possible to build a scalable and sustainable organization from that old school perspective. And you may think, oh, I'm not in the kind of industry, or I don't have the kind of team that's even capable of operating that way. And I mean, I've worked with hundreds of leaders in all different industries. You can hire smart no matter where you are, because there's smart people everywhere. And it's about being smart and being inspired and having drive, having the hunger to grow. Really, that's what it's about. It's a growth mindset that we're looking for, and that can happen at every level of your company, all the way from your executives, if you have them, to the person who's kind of lowest on the ladder. So what we're really looking for is what we call the 4-8s, where we have, of course, everybody has to have the capacity to do their job, to fulfill their role, right? That skill level. But there's the 3 other ones that are way more important because you could train for skill, but what you can't train for is the get it part, right? They get your culture, they get your vision, they get your mission, they're bought in, they get it, they want to be there. The other one is to want it, and that's the wanting to be there and wanting to get better and better. But then there's another one, and that's kind of the highest level, that's the needed. That's the needing for like some people, your true A players, that's who they are at their core, who they are at their like DNA level, and they cannot be anything but excellent. They take it personally. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit today, is like, how do you build that team of people and lead that team of people who are excellent for excellence sake, so you have that all-star team that can grow the business for you. And I'm just not gonna take anybody for real who say to me, I can't do that in my industry, because I've seen it in every single industry imaginable. So what we're looking for are people who are intelligent and creative, and not people who can just follow orders. Because what we want to do is we want to leverage their ability to shape course direction. So this goes back to, we talk a lot about leaders at every level. And this is really what you can create. You can create leaders at every level, but that also means everybody has to think of themselves as a leader in their scope, in their role, where they live. And it doesn't matter if, they're your janitors at night or they're top executives. Everybody can think creatively, intelligently, strategically and give a lot more than just performing a task. And that's really what we're trying to get away from, is just performing a task. So especially, you might think this only applies to knowledge workers, but it applies to anybody. Because what we're doing here is, and this may take a little while, this may be something that you have to teach people because they may not have learned this anywhere else before. And this is their great opportunity working with you. That means you have to train them to think. You have to train them to be a collaborative team player. You have to train them to plan and work off a plan and then be strategic about how they do that. And this is really where it's training and retraining and is empowering and building that trust that will enable you to let go later on, because that's the only way you're going to be able to have this all-star team, is when you can let go and let them do and you stay out of the way. So, but that can only happen when you go through that process with them, where at the end of that process you feel like you have a smart person who's bought in, who's excited, who's creative, who's strategic, and who thinks on their feet. So this is really also where, when you have the right person, they deliver with pride. They deliver excellent customer service because they understand how incredibly crucial that is to the success of your business. They're enthusiastic about career advancement. They're enthusiastic about growth, and even that, if that just means tiny little steps. But here's what is true: when you have somebody in the same role for an extended length of time, they will get bored with that role and they will start plateauing and they will start declining and your performance will diminish. So the only way to keep a person's value up is by constantly challenging and training them. And that means they're going to get better and better and better at what they do. They're going to advance, they're going to shift around seats, whatever it is. But you as a leader have to train your leaders to keep an eye on that this is happening all the way through your team at every single level of your organization. So we want to make sure that we help people be awake, not complacent. We have to help them think, not just blindly follow direction. And we have to help them start becoming strategic, which means they actually recognize the big picture and they understand how their contribution fits into the big picture and how it's valuable and important, because that will mean they are going to think and go the extra mile. But that only happens when you make the effort and when your leaders make the effort to have this part of the daily conversation. So your job as a leader is to grow autonomy in your team, to grow curiosity, to empower your team, to celebrate and acknowledge them and help them build that initiative that creates an autonomous, self-managing team, because that's the only way you're going to get to that self-managing company, which is where all your freedom lives, and that's where all your opportunity lives, because that's the only way you can build a company that is scalable. So no matter what, you need leaders at every level. You need that autonomous team to create that freedom for you. And we do that by paying attention to 3 areas of focus. One is that autonomy, which means we have to distribute decision-making power. And that means redistribute decision-making power, because right now it's probably maybe on you and then a few people at the upper level if you have kind of a leadership team, or it's just on you and then you make decisions for everybody else on your team. So the top down is the thing that keeps you handcuffed, because that means you are the hub. Everything goes through you. Or if you have an organizational structure, then that means your managers are the hub for all the information that needs to be kind of doled out, or all the decisions that need to be doled out. which means that if you're not available or they're not available, everything grinds to a standstill because nobody can make a decision without you or without them. And then now what? So we need to get into this place where we ask ourselves, what do they need to be empowered? What do I need to do to empower them? What are they missing? And that we really need that situation where we look at every single team member as a very valuable source of information, because for this all to work, we need the information to go up and down in the company. So not just top down, we need to have it trickle up, cascade down, or cascade down and trickle up, whatever you want to call it. But we need your employees to be part of the conversation because they are your boots on the ground. They're going to be a whole lot better at what they do than you should be. They're going to have the information that you need to make better decisions because they deal with a whole different perspective. Think about, they probably understand your customer needs a lot better than you do because they deal with the customers. They understand customer expectations extremely well. They can contribute to solving problems and, of course, bring innovation to the whole game. So this is how you exceed customer expectations, because you get all that feedback from your team and then listen to it and implement it. So this is how we get people to manage themselves, by having that authority, by being empowered, by having the information, and by giving the information, and then getting feedback from you, and you or your managers, your leaders, being their mentors around this. So that's really that first piece of autonomy. So create that redistributed decision-making. Second part is creating the community and the culture that can really support and sustain this. So, to create a high-performance culture, you have to know your people. And that means you know everybody who you directly work with, and then your leadership, your managers know everybody they work with directly. So that means every person on your team, there's somebody who knows them as a human. And that's really what enables you to build a high-performance culture, because that enables you to build strong relationships. And that means when you have strong relationships, that means people trust you enough to be in a collaborative space. They stick their neck out for you. They try things. They innovate. They make mistakes for you, which they need to do to make things better. We need to break things to make things better a lot of times. But that also means they have to have the trust in you that you give them the permission to do that's actually something that is expected. So building these strong relationships and then setting incredibly strong standards for performance. So as the leader, if leadership is mostly up to you, and again, if you have more levels of the organization, if you have a strategic organization, this falls between you and your leaders. When we give your organization kind of that once over to optimize every role, it means you need to triage every role. You need to look at every single role that's in your company and get really clear about, what is missing here? How can we make this even better? And part of that is setting extremely high standards. But that means you have to show everybody how you want something done in utter detail. So when you have a specific expectation for how something is done, you must show them. And that means, so you set the standards, and you and I both know setting the standards is not enough. Then you need to consistently reactivate the standards. That means you have to train, and train again. That means you have to follow up and check back and follow up and make sure until it becomes your norm, until it becomes the habit, until it becomes this is just the way things are. But that initial part, the initial phase, is a lot of effort put in. but it is well worth it for the outcome that you have later. So setting those extremely high standards. There's a great book that's called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And I love that book because it talks about creating a culture of high standards and making sure that everything gets checked and checked again to get to that standard of excellence. And this is not something, like I said earlier, that you have to do forever, because we don't want to be the micromanager. But we have to start with that, because how else will the team know what is expected, what the standard is, if not you or your managers set that standard and then defend that standard, because you are the guardian of that standard, and so are they. So this is where we create mastery for its own sake. And this is where we help an all-star team be connected to that DNA that creates mastery for its own sake. So by doing this, we help people have an internal measure for success. When they understand what the standards are, what that exactly looks like, that becomes their measure. So that becomes their internal measure without you having to constantly enforce and reinforce it. So we create that internal measure that people live by, so that you don't have to constantly be on their tail about anything. So it has to be instilled in people. You have to obsess about standards if you want it to go right. And that sometimes starts with something extremely simple, as in, the coach in this book was talking about, I teach them, first thing I do is I teach them how to put on their shoes right, which seems silly, but hey, if they don't put on their shoes right, they get blisters. If they have blisters, they can't run. If they can't run, they can't blah, blah, blah. So we have to look at what are the crucial, essential pieces to the business where the standard has to be absolutely high, so that you can instill those standards and train them on the standards and be the guardian of those standards, so that this is just the raised standard of performance that helps you create that self-managing company, that you don't really have to be the hub of everything anymore. That helps you build that trust that you have to have in your team, that you need to let go of the reins so that you can really have the freedom that you're looking for. And as you engage your team with this also means you have to trust them enough. And this is, I know for a lot of people, they're going to turn kind of green and sweaty when I say this, but that means when you set the standards right, and when you teach them how to do things the right way, and then this is part of the standard of excellence of the culture, that means you have to trust them to be essential in hiring and promoting and onboarding and raising new team members, because now they are your representatives. So we have to be able that we create this really, really strong team. And that also means once you do that, you and your leaders have to be able to set their ego aside and let them operate. And really trust that the team's collective wisdom is higher than your own. And I know that's tough for a lot of people. So that's the second part. And then the third part is listening more than talking. And because when you can build a very strong relationship when people feel heard, it immediately undermines a relationship when people don't feel heard. So it's really important to hear their opinions, value their input, use their feedback, and take their direction and strategy as part of what goes into company planning and execution. So this is where you have to listen strategically for the business benefits when you talk to your team. And sometimes it's tough especially when you have, kind of risen through the ranks and you're in a top position, and then you have to lean down, or you are leaning down and you're talking to people in much lower positions where you have to listen intuitively for what's important. So that also means you have to ask a ton of questions. You have to get into depth. You have to believe that, you have to humble yourself, and you have to believe that it's worth your time and your patience to have this belief in the rest of your team that they can contribute strategically, that they can show up with incredible insights and information that will be a game changer to your company. But this is really important, this leaning down and really helping the rest of the team become a part of the whole. So listening intuitively, asking a lot of questions, understanding their meaning, understanding their ideas and their needs, and implementing that in the way the company strategy works. So this is kind of the foundation for building an autonomous team that enables you to have a self-managing company. And look, the best leaders are the ones that have the ability to respond and engage with your ears so that you can remove the obstacles and help people be successful. Because the most important question that you can ask in a one-on-one with one of your team members is, how can I unblock you? And that has to be your meaning in every interaction that you have with your team. So I hope this helps. We have a brand new training out there that addresses all this in detail. So go to bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/leap, bulletproofbusinessgrowth.com/leap, and check out the training. And I will see you next time.